You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, and thanks for joining Revolution 250. This is where we remember events that took place 250 years ago this week. It's a short bonus episode from the American Revolution podcast to remember these important 250th anniversaries from the Revolutionary War. This week, we remember the establishment of Roderigue Hortalez Co. on May 2nd, 1776. The founding of a new business in France may not sound like a landmark event, but the Roderigue Hortalez Co. was no ordinary business. The Continental Congress had sent Silas Deane to France in hopes of getting French aid for the war effort and hopefully a treaty that would bring France into the war on America's side. Deane found the French government largely uninterested in helping. France was still rebuilding its military, especially its navy, following the losses from the 7 Years' War. It simply wasn't ready for another fight with Britain. If France had provided aid to the American colonies, Britain would almost certainly declare war on France. Instead, the French minister, the Comte de Vergennes, suggested that Deane speak with a man named Pierre-Augustin de Beaumarchais, who had just established Roderigue Hortalez Co. Beaumarchais was a French playwright, known for authoring The Marriage of Figaro and The Barber of Seville, among other plays. What was less well known was that Beaumarchais had done some undercover work for the King of France and also had been the homosexual partner of a well-known European arms dealer. Vergennes had encouraged Beaumarchais to set up Roderigue Hortalez Co. as a front company through which France and Spain could funnel covert military aid to America without it being immediately obvious to Britain what was going on. The company offered Deane massive amounts of credit on generous terms to be paid back with Virginia tobacco at some later date. The money to offer this credit came from the French treasury. Vergennes also convinced the Spanish treasury to match the contribution. Deane did not know the true source of the funds, and he was in no hurry to ask any questions. He had been given a really generous line of credit to buy arms and other much-needed military supplies that could be shipped back to America. Soon, shiploads of goods were being loaded onto ships and headed for America. The scheme definitely had some problems, and the biggest problem was an American named Arthur Lee. Before Beaumarchais founded Roderigue Hortalez Co., he had been in London doing some secret work for the King of France. While he was there, he happened to meet Arthur Lee, who was a working lawyer in London at the time. Lee was originally from Virginia and part of the powerful Virginia family that took a leading role in the Patriot cause. Two of his brothers were in the Continental Congress at the time. Lee and Beaumarchais had discussed setting up a covert arms scheme in France to help the American cause. Both men believed they would become rich on commissions for arms sales related to these deals. Lee remained in Britain, and Beaumarchais then got this secret deal with the French government to launch the company on his own. Lee learned some of the details of the deal and confided with a friend in Britain named Paul Wentworth. This man immediately sold that information to British intelligence, so that London was aware of the scheme from almost the very beginning. Lee also believed that Deane had made a deal with Beaumarchais similar to the one that he and Beaumarchais had discussed earlier. So Lee believed that Deane and Beaumarchais were getting rich and that he, Lee, was not. As a result, Lee did his best to destroy the scheme, writing to his brothers that Deane was skimming money and enriching himself. Deane had made these deals to buy equipment on credit, which would have to be paid back. Lee asserted, without any basis, that these deals were actually secret gifts from the French government and that Deane planned to keep any American payments for himself. This would eventually lead to a scandal and end Deane's diplomatic career, even though Deane proved that he was right and Lee was wrong. The lack of payment by Congress also prevented aid from continuing to flow from this source. Even so, Roderigue Hortalez Co. played a key role in the critical first year of the American Revolution. I hope you've enjoyed this Revolution 250 moment. For more details on this topic, check out episode 108 on blog.amrevpodcast.com. Rev250-081.com. I also encourage you to subscribe for free to the whole podcast on whatever platform you like. Thanks again for listening to this Revolution 250 moment on the American Revolution podcast.